When I was 16, my parents made it clear to their friends that I was never meant to exist. I remember standing there as my mother laughed, pointed at me and said, "Birth control is only 99% effective, he's the 1%. That night, with nothing but $40 in a backpack, I left. It took them 6 years to track me down. Today, for the first time in all that time, they showed up at my door in tears. Even as a kid, I knew I was never the favorite. My brother, Morris, was the golden child, the one they planned for, the one with good grades, the Letterman jacket, the baseball dreams. He was everything they wanted in a son. Me. According to my mother's long-running joke, I was what happens when you trust off-brand condoms. She started telling that one when I was 8. It became a staple at family gatherings, a joke everyone seemed to find funny but me. Over time, I learned to smile through it, to let the words bounce off me like I was made of stone. When adults asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'd say a tax deduction, my father's pet name for me after a few drinks. Some people thought it was clever. Truth is, I was just repeating the script I'd grown up with. The moment everything shifted was on my mother's birthday. 2 nights before her big party, we had a small family dinner, the 4 of us, at a middle-of-the-road restaurant. My father complained about the prices while knocking back his 4th scotch. The real event came later when my mother threw a fancy dinner for her work friends, the high society women from the country club she'd always dreamed of joining. Our modest house was scrubbed spotless and dressed up like something out of a Pinterest post. New placemats, polished silverware, elegant candles, the works. My father was forced into his only nice shirt and given strict orders to cap his drinking at 5. Morris, of course, was showered in praise and baseball talk. No one even bothered to ask me not to embarrass them. It was like I wasn't even there. The evening was going smoothly enough. I played the part of the invisible server, handing out appetizers and staying out of the way while Morris's future was discussed like a sure thing. My father nodded silently, fighting to stay composed. I knew my role, be seen as little as possible. But everything fell apart when one of my mother's guests brought up family planning. She was the type you could picture demanding to speak to a manager, perfectly styled hair, sharp eyes, voice like a blade. She made an offhand comment about how expensive kids are these days. I saw it happen. My mother, for glasses of wine and got that look. The look she got right before cutting someone down for a laugh. Collecting empty glasses, she pointed right at me and with a smirk, delivered the line I knew too well. Birth control is only 99% effective and he's the proof. She paused deliberately before adding, he's the 1%. Laughter exploded around the room. Even my father, who usually just drifted through these moments, let out a loud, unrestrained laugh. Standing there with a handful of dirty glasses, it hit me, they were all laughing at the idea that I should never have existed. Morris, however, stayed silent, staring down at his plate like he wished he could disappear. At least he showed a shred of the shame everyone else so clearly lacked. But my mother wasn't finished. Almost proudly, she gestured toward Morris and added, "We already had our perfect son, Michael. This one, well, he's what we call the family mistake." The laughter picked up again. Someone, maybe my father's boss, even chimed in, "Ouch, that's gotta leave a mark." It felt like a scene straight out of a bad sitcom. Without throwing the glasses or saying a word, I calmly set them down on the table and quietly made my way to my room. By the time I left the room, the conversation had already shifted to vacation stories about Cancun, as though none of it had happened. Sitting alone on my bed, surrounded by the muffled sounds of laughter downstairs, something inside me broke like a computer overloaded with too many programs. My emotional system crashed. Everything inside me went quiet. I realized in that moment I had to leave. With a sense of finality, I grabbed my school backpack, dumped out my books because who needs trigonometry when you're about to live on the streets? And packed what mattered. A few t-shirts, jeans, underwear, my toothbrush, the $40 my grandmother gave me for my birthday meant for a video game, my phone charger, and a couple of emergency energy bars for the nights Dad forgot to buy groceries. As I packed, Morris came in. He didn't say much, he didn't need to. He knew what was happening. Without hesitation, he handed me $120 from his savings and his old phone, still working though no longer connected to the family plan. "I'll load $20 of prepaid minutes on it tomorrow," he told me, his voice flat as if predicting the weather. "They won't even notice you're gone until sometime tomorrow afternoon." His words hit like a quiet truth, obvious, inevitable. I felt my resolve waver, the sting of tears rising, unsure if I should just give up and stay in that disaster of a family. But then I heard another burst of laughter downstairs, my mother's voice complaining about my attitude. That was at my breaking point. I waited until midnight when the house finally fell silent. My parents were passed out after draining their wine and whiskey bottles, and Morris, as if remembering old habits, left the light on at his desk, the old signal we used to use when sneaking to the kitchen for midnight snacks. It was my cue. Quietly, without leaving a note, because what was there to say? "Thanks for making me feel like an accident for 16 years? I left. The October air was cold, and though I had nowhere to go, I preferred the uncertainty of solitude over staying in that house another second. I walked aimlessly until I reached a 24-hour McDonald's, where I used the free Wi-Fi to figure out my next move. In the end, I bought a Greyhound ticket to a nearby city not too far, but far enough to put some distance between me and everything I left behind. That first week was rough, really rough. I spent 2 nights at the bus station before finding a youth hostel that allowed me to stay for 2 weeks while I got a job as a dishwasher at a nondescript diner. They didn't care about my underage status as long as I worked hard and got paid in cash. Morris and I stayed in touch through a disposable email account we created. He told me that when my mother reported my disappearance, she was emotional in front of the cameras, but later criticized me for being so dramatic. My father, on the other hand, got drunk and said he'd come home when he was hungry enough. But I decided I would never return, especially when hunger gnawed at my stomach while I slept in a hostel surrounded by late-night shouting. By December, I still didn't have a proper coat. 2 months after running away, I met Ronnie at the diner. He found me sleeping in the break room instead of doing my dishwashing shift. Instead of firing me, Ronnie asked why I wasn't in school. Between cold fries after closing time, I told him my entire story. It turned out that Ronnie, in his own way, had also experienced his family's mistake. The details were different, but the bitterness was the same. Initially, he got me an unofficial job helping with renovations, and eventually I formalized that job. I earned my GED at 17, and though I still couldn't afford my own place, I ended up crashing on a friend's couch for the first 2 years. Then I moved into a depressing little studio. My routine consisted of 12-hour workdays, eating instant ramen, and falling asleep watching YouTube tutorials on taxes and credit scores using free Wi-Fi. There was no room for a social life, only the need to work, save, and survive. Morris, a close friend, graduated and moved to a university in another state, a smart choice on his part. Though we kept in touch, the distance made it clear we were both carving out our own paths. By the 3rd year, I started to feel almost normal again. I got my own apartment, which at least didn't have visible mold stains anymore. I enrolled in online community college classes and even had a few Tinder dates that, thankfully, weren't disastrous. During this time, my parents seemed to finally accept that I wasn't coming back to them for help. 5 months later, a missing person report was filed, but it went nowhere. Despite their efforts, I was too busy working and paying bills under my legal name. In a way, they weren't trying too hard to find me. Meanwhile, Morris sent updates. He told me they'd turned my old room into a home gym, and that for my 17th birthday, my father had discovered the true value of my baseball card collection. My mother, on the other hand, had informed the neighbors that I was at a special boarding school for troubled teens. It was then that I understood. My struggle was no longer just about escaping. It was about becoming someone they would regret, losing someone who would make them realize the value of what they had discarded. I let go of the constant anger, though I admit at least it burned calories. I became cold and calculating. I began to realize that money wasn't just a means of survival, but a tool for power. Every paycheck, every top grade in my online classes, and every new skill I acquired became a brick in the wall that separated me from that diner where I once served dirty glasses while everyone laughed at my expense. Now, at 22, 6 years later, I have my own apartment, my life runs on my own terms, and I've built a chosen family of friends who truly care. Interestingly, Morris is the only one who knows my exact location, and he swore to keep it secret, that is, until last week, when he called to warn me that my parents were actively searching for me. The reason, it turns out, is that the Bank of Karma has decided to collect what they emotionally owe me, and I've become the debt collector, with interest compounding daily. The first part of my story went viral. My inbox was flooded with messages, and I received countless awards and expressions of validation confirming that, indeed, I wasn't the crazy one in this story. Many asked if everything I shared was real, and the answer is yes, though some details have been modified for obvious reasons. But the essence of my experience remains unchanged. Going back to the beginning, the first 2.5 years after becoming independent were purely about survival: double shifts, cheap ramen, and nights spent on a mattress I found near a dumpster. Don't judge, I disinfected it with as much Lysol as I could get. I checked my email at the public library where Morris kept me updated on the situation at home. My parents spent about 3 weeks searching for me. My mother posted dramatic updates on Facebook, accompanied by my school photo, receiving daily sympathy from strangers, while my father barely contacted 2 of my classmates. By the 4th month, Morris sent me a screenshot where my mother proudly announced they had converted my old room into their dream gym, equipped with a makeshift Peloton and decorative weights that were rarely used. The post, titled "Turning Life's Lemons into Lemonade #FitItMom," got more reactions than any post about my disappearance. By the 3rd year, I had saved enough to enroll in community college courses. Not the expensive in-person ones, but the affordable online classes. After long days, even though my back ached from hours hunched over my laptop on the kitchen counter, which served as a makeshift desk on 2 milk crates, that pain felt different. It was the pain of productivity. I studied business and finance not out of a passion for spreadsheets, but because I wanted to understand that money is just math, and math doesn't judge whether you're loved or not. It was during this time that I met Zoe in an online study group. After helping her fix an Excel formula for a group project, she reached out to me privately. We started video chatting about assignments, and soon our conversations expanded to all sorts of topics. Zoe was an extremely intelligent young woman, balancing her paralegal certification studies with a job at a law firm. Our first in-person meeting was at a melancholic cafe halfway between our apartments. I remember the nervousness. I wore my only decent shirt, which still had a faint pasta sauce stain from a failed attempt to hide the imperfection. She arrived with her hair in a messy bun, glasses on, and a smile that made me forget, if only for 3 hours, that I was a family mistake. That night, I told her everything, and instead of turning away, Zoe gave me a look that held no pity, just a cold understanding. She told me how her own mother used her as an emotional punching bag. We realized that, though both of us were damaged, our wounds were of different kinds. Zoe changed my perspective on survival. Where I saw need, she saw opportunity. I remember, while browsing property listings on the floor of my small apartment, she would point to buildings and say, "The value of that building is totally off, considering the neighborhood's growth pattern." Meanwhile, Morris kept sending me updates from home. My father's alcoholism had worsened after he was laid off, and my mother's social climbing had hit a financial wall. Her credit card debts were mounting, and the house had been refinanced twice. Morris finished his degree and moved to another city for work. He was the only one who knew where I lived, though he never knew my exact address. We had a message with the phrase "blue waffle," an outdated internet joke that still made us laugh, meant my parents had discovered my location. At the beginning of my 4th year, things really started to improve. I was promoted twice at work, moved into an apartment where the neighbors didn't yell at 3 a.m., and started building credit with a secured card. Every small victory felt huge. I immersed myself in personal finance forums on Reddit and YouTube channels, learning about investments, compound interest, and how to build a solid credit history. Every dollar saved was another brick in the wall separating me from having to depend on my parents. Life took another decisive turn in my 5th year when Zoe moved in with me. Our apartment, modest and 1 bedroom with working appliances and a shower that no longer changed temperature without warning, became our home. Between cheap stir-fried dinners on a second-hand sofa and financial plans almost as intricate as wedding organizing, the routine seemed to be heading towards stability. That's when Morris dropped the first bombshell. He called me differently than usual, which immediately set off alarm bells. It turned out my father had lost the house. Not right away, but after years of financial restructuring, refinancing, late payments, and failed business ideas, the bank was preparing for eviction within 90 days. As if that weren't enough, they suddenly remembered they had another son. My mother started posting childhood photos of me on Facebook, with pleading messages like, "We miss Michael, please share to help us find our son," using dramatic hashtags and rhetoric that sharply contrasted with the neglect I'd experienced. The comments on those posts were full of irony. Some users recalled how she had once claimed I was at a special boarding school or that I had enlisted in the army. My favorite was the one that asked, "Isn't it true that room turned into your gym?" subtly mocking the whole situation. Meanwhile, my father had joined several Facebook groups for parents of wayward children, trying to portray himself as a heartbroken father desperately searching for me. Morris even told me that within a brief 3-week period, my father had managed to stay sober, only to relapse into his old habits again. Throughout all of this, I watched from a distance, following Morris updates and keeping an eye on their social media. Meanwhile, something cold was building inside me. It wasn't just anger, it was something more calculated. Zoe noticed that during dinner, I would often zone out, working out numbers in my mind. Instead of trying to dissuade me from what I was about to do, Zoe helped refine my plan. With her paralegal knowledge, she guided me through the legal intricacies I needed to understand. Having always lived frugally and invested aggressively, I had kept my expenses low while building an investment portfolio. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make moves. I came up with the idea, and with Zoe's help, I began to understand the legal details I'd need to master. Our plan took shape. I contacted the bank that held my parents' mortgage using a different name, and I formed an LLC to legitimize my interest in buying distressed properties in that area. After 3 weeks of paperwork, I had acquired my parents' mortgage. They now, unknowingly, owed me money for the roof over their heads. I didn't rush to accelerate the foreclosure process. Instead, I preferred to wait for them to finally seek me out and beg for help, not understanding that I controlled their financial fate. Zoe called it poetic justice, and I saw it as the fair balance in the accounting of their mistakes. Meanwhile, my mother's desperate social media campaign to find me was gaining traction. In a local Facebook group, someone shared her post. People love a good family reunion story, especially when they don't know the truth behind it. The mistake happened 6 months ago when Morris visited us for the weekend and posted an Instagram story at a local restaurant with a mural that clearly identified our city. Though he deleted the post after 10 minutes, my mother had already seen it. Immediately, the messages started flooding in. Morris showed me his phone with 27 unread messages from my mother, all asking, "Is that Michael? Where are you?" That same night, Morris sent me an emergency message. At first, we laughed, thinking the odds of them finding me in a city of 2 million people based on a mural were slim. But we were wrong. 2 weeks ago, Morris called again, telling me that my mother had joined every Facebook group in the city and had posted my high school photo along with a melodramatic story about a tragic separation. Then last week, the neighbor across the hall showed me a screenshot where my mother, having found our apartment complex's community page, was messaging residents. That day I changed the locks. Part of me wanted to run away and start over somewhere else, but Zoe reminded me that I now own the family home and held all the cards. 3 days ago while working from home the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera on my phone, thanks to affordable smart home technology. There they were, my mother and father, standing at my door, looking much older and visibly more desperate than I remembered. My father had lost weight while my mother had gained. Neither of them seemed to have slept in days. He shifted restlessly as if urgently needing a drink, and she clutched her purse, as though it held her last shred of dignity. I didn't answer the door. After several rings, they left a handwritten note begging me to contact them to discuss an urgent family matter. That same night, Morris confirmed what I already knew: they had come for the house. They needed money and were looking for the past mistake to rescue them. For the next 2 days, Zoe and I prepared. We gathered documents and rehearsed what I was going to say, how to stay calm, and how to prevent them from seeing the hurt boy they had left behind. Yesterday morning the doorbell rang again. Once more I saw their desperate faces on the camera. This time I decided to buzz them in. After 6 years of silence I was going to meet them, unaware of what awaited them behind the door. That past mistake which they had laughed at, now made me the owner of their home, with their mistakes and debts accruing interest. As I pressed the buzzer, my hands were shaking not from fear, but from that strange electric tingle you get after drinking 3 energy drinks on an empty stomach, when your body doesn't know whether it's excited or about to have a panic attack. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind for years, gone over every possible phrase and expression in the bathroom mirror like a maniac. But when the buzzer finally sounded, all those prepared words vanished. Zoe squeezed my hand before heading to our bedroom, having agreed to stay out of sight for this first encounter. It was just me and them. Opening the door felt surreal, like one of those nightmares where you find yourself back in high school in your underwear. But I was fully dressed and they somehow seemed naked. My mother looked smaller, her hair now dyed with box dye instead of the salon style she once had, and her designer handbag had been replaced by one from a discount store. My father seemed to have aged 15 years in an instant. His usual alcohol-induced puffiness was gone, leaving him almost unrecognizable, with sagging skin where roundness had once been. Silence stretched for 10 uncomfortable seconds until my mother made a choked sound, attempting to hug me. I stepped back and the rejection hit her like a violent physical blow. My father stood motionless, his eyes scanning every corner of the apartment, the furniture in good condition, the smart TV, all evidence that their past mistake didn't involve living in squalor. My mother immediately began crying, just as I had anticipated. Emotional manipulation had been her lifelong language. My father, trying to salvage some dignity, asked if they could come in to talk. I let them in without offering drinks or seats, allowing them to stand in my living room like uninvited door-to-door salesmen. My mother kept saying she couldn't believe she had found me, that she never stopped looking for me, and that countless nights she had cried thinking about my safety. My father just nodded in agreement like a dashboard ornament. Interestingly, neither mentioned the home gym that had occupied my old room. It's funny how those details are forgotten when you need something. Finally, I asked them directly why they had come, not what they wanted to discuss, but why they were in my home after 6 long years. That's when the facade crumbled. My mother's fake crying abruptly stopped mid-sob, and my father's shoulders slumped even further. They exchanged a knowing glance, revealing that in their eyes, the truth could no longer be hidden. My parents confessed they were losing the house, and the bank was about to foreclose. They had tried everything: loan modifications, refinancing, even launching an online fundraiser that managed to scrape together just $87 from relatives already tired of bailing them out. They needed a roof, money, a way to fix the mistake they'd made. Astonished, I asked why they hadn't turned to Morris for help. That's when the atmosphere shifted. It turned out Morris had lent them $3,000 6 months earlier, money he couldn't afford to lose, being fresh out of school and buried in student loans. Within weeks, they had spent it and asked for more until Morris finally drew the line. At that moment, the reality of their backup plan came into focus. The strangest part was watching them shift from desperate to calculating right in front of me. My mother's eyes flickered between guilt and a mental tally of the furniture's worth, while my father casually tossed out questions about my job and income, gauging what they might get from me. I need time to think, I told them. But my mother immediately switched to a tone of urgency, reminding me they had just 2 weeks before losing our home. My father chimed in, claiming they'd need at least $10,000 to secure a new place, not including the deposit. The number seemed to rise with every word. After 20 heavy minutes, I walked them to the door, promising to call the next day. My mother, relentless, tried to guilt me with tears and a forced goodbye, while my father clung to a calm, detached mask, as though they hadn't abandoned a 16-year-old boy and erased him from their lives for years. As soon as they left, I cracked in the kitchen, laughing and crying at once. Zoe found me sitting on the floor in the middle of it. It wasn't my proudest moment, but she didn't try to fix it. She just sat beside me and waited. By the next morning we had a plan. I called my parents and invited them to dinner, not at my place, but at a mid-priced restaurant where I'd reserved a private room. Their eager response came a little too quickly. When they arrived, they weren't greeted by just me. Zoe was there. Morris had flown in that morning. And Ronnie, one of the few people I consider real family, was seated at the table too, the same people who stood by me when it actually counted. My mother's expression changed the moment she realized this wasn't a simple cash handoff. My father looked tempted to order a double whiskey but paused, unsure if I'd be footing the bill. I let everyone settle and order drinks before calmly laying out the truth. I told them I knew about the foreclosure. Their faces shifted from confused to hopeful, believing I was about to save them. Then I slid a folder onto the table, the mortgage documents. Thanks to my LLC, I now held ownership of their debt. Legally, the house was mine. My mother went pale. My father's face turned red. Morris stared down at his glass, barely hiding a grin, and Zoe watched me with the cold precision of a scientist studying a specimen. I continued, speaking calmly and without hesitation, laying out the options before them. I could move forward with foreclosure immediately, offer them a payment plan they couldn't possibly afford, or allow them to stay as tenants but under strict conditions. Then, in a final unexpected turn, I proposed that if they agreed to meet certain terms, I would transfer the house to them, free of debt. The first condition was that they publicly acknowledge the way they had mistreated me, not just to friends and neighbors, the same ones who used to mock me with their 1% jokes, but in a broader, open way. The second was that they attend family therapy sessions with Morris. Not to rebuild the relationship that ship had sailed, but so they could, under a professional supervision, fully hear how their actions had affected their children. And lastly, the third condition, they would sign a legal agreement promising to never again ask me for financial help. It was in that moment my mother finally broke down, tears falling for real this time, with no audience to perform for. My father, meanwhile, stared at the documents as though they were written in a language he couldn't decipher. Morris stepped in then, reminding them how fortunate they were to receive such a fair offer, especially given the history, how they had treated me like something disposable, replacing my absence with gym equipment, while I built a life for myself from nothing. The dinner was excruciating. My mother swung wildly between defensive anger and manipulative weeping, while my father sat in stunned silence except for the one moment he asked if I'd done this just to hurt him. I answered, cold and steady, this isn't about revenge. You cast me aside when you believed there was nothing valuable in me. Now you want to turn me into an ATM when it suits you. That's not how family works or life. In the end, they left without committing to anything. I gave them 48 hours to decide. Those 2 days were strange. I felt powerful yet hollow. Zoe stayed close, quietly taking care of me, bringing me chamomile tea I didn't even drink, just sitting beside me as I stared into nothing. Morris camped out on the couch, a quiet buffer against any unexpected visits. On the morning of the deadline, my parents returned. They looked exhausted, defeated. They agreed to my conditions not because they truly grasped the damage they'd done, but because they had no other choice. The paperwork was signed without major drama, with Zoe acting as notary alongside a colleague. Since then, it's been complicated. They've kept their word, probably because they know I have all the documents and the means to act if necessary. Not long after, my mother posted a long, self-pitying apology on Facebook, somehow still casting herself as the victim. My father's made a couple of awkward phone calls, trying to gauge whether I still resent him. Morris left the next day, but before he did, he pulled me into a long hug and told me he was proud of me for doing something he'd never found the courage to do. Is this revenge? Maybe. But to me, it feels more like setting things right, like finally balancing an equation that had been off for 22 long years. Am I happy? No. The word that fits better is satisfied. The anger is still there, but it no longer feels like an open, burning wound. It's more like a scar closed, no longer bleeding. Last night, Zoe and I lay in bed, talking about the simple, ordinary things couples do when they're trying to build a normal life, maybe adopting a dog, maybe starting to save for a house of our own. She asked me if I regretted any of it, and I took a long moment to really think about it. I remembered that 16-year-old boy with $40 in his backpack, the nights I went without food, the double shifts I worked through fevers because I had no one to fall back on. And I thought about who I've become because of all of it, someone who, starting from nothing, managed to rise and find the people who truly valued him. I told her, I don't regret being abandoned or suffering, or even delivering what might have felt like punishment. Some mistakes, with time, turn out to be the best decisions we ever make. Dear listeners, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.